Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video. Hello, my indestructible sewer rats. I'm your host today, Mina Lay, and we're going to be talking about all things cleanliness, scent, and smell. I got this idea because I was listening to this podcast called Articles of Interest. If you don't know about it, you definitely should because it is fantastic. And it's like a fashion history podcast. They don't make too many episodes at once, but there was one episode that I was listening to from 2020 and it was about perfumes, which I love perfumes. I don't really talk about it that much. I used to collect perfumes and I kind of stopped, but now I'm trying to get back into it. One thing that I found very fascinating in this episode is that they talked to Barbara Herman, who is this vintage perfume expert, and she talks about perfume trends.
In the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, women were marketed perfumes that were more funky.
Women smelled like tobacco and leather and, as Jacques Guerlain said about his perfumes, perfume should smell like the underside of my mistress.
Which was so different from the 90s perfume era, which was like the clean perfume era, as she calls it.
The 90s was generally the clean decade.
This is when perfumes like CK1 came out for men and for women. There was this wave of clean smells that were light and fresh and inoffensive. They made you smell like you just showered.
And Herman argues and kind of laments that we're still in this clean perfume era, especially in the US, which got me to thinking about cleanliness and how it's represented in the United States and how it honestly can be harmful. One of the most obvious examples of cleanliness being weaponized is in the way that it is used to oppress or other groups, marginalized groups. As Catherine Aschenberg writes in her book, The Dirt on Clean, it follows that hygiene has always been a convenient stick with which to beat other peoples who never seem to get it right. The outsiders usually err on the side of dirtiness. The ancient Egyptians thought that sitting a dusty body in still water, as the Greeks did, was a foul idea. Late 19th century Americans were scandalized by the dirtiness of Europeans. The Nazis promoted the idea of Jewish uncleanliness. More recently, a 2005 law allowed public librarians in San Luis Obispo County, California, to remove smelly readers. A law that I imagine disproportionately affects houseless people, who are also a demographic that is most reliant on public libraries. But regardless, there is this just historical idea that we, our group, our people, don't have a smell, and everyone else who's not in our group does. Smells have also been used to oppress on a gendered level. So maidens, the most virtuous womanly group, smelled fragrant and floral. Wives and mothers smelled like they're cooking. And unvirtuous women, the sex workers, the rebellers, these women smelled bad. In the book Aroma, The Cultural History of Smell, the authors write, while men are allowed to smell sweaty and unpleasant without losing any of their masculine identity, women who don't smell sweet are traitors to the ideal of femininity and objects of disgust. This is all the more true in that behind the myth of the perfume sex, women are suspected of being naturally foul, reeking of unpleasant body fluids such as menstrual blood. So, we have a lot to discuss, but first, a word from our sponsor. Squarespace is a fantastic platform to help you build the website of your dreams for both desktop and mobile optimization. They have tons of pre-made templates and extra customization options to make your website uniquely you. To aid you in growing your business, Squarespace offers plenty of analytic breakdowns. You can see who's checking you out and for how long they're spending on your page, where they're based, etc. You can also send newsletters, which I know are really trendy these days. And oh look, more templates to choose from. So check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/MinaLay to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So the first question I want to address is, did everyone smell, especially before the invention of modern plumbing and antibacterial soap? Well, the idea that everyone was smelly back in the day is not wholly true. Most of our preconceptions of dirtiness come from 14th to 18th century Western standards. But in earlier times and in other cultures, people might have smelled okay or possibly even good. For example, the ancient Egyptians wore all manners of scents: rose, cinnamon, parsley, lemongrass, myrrh. They even concocted complex perfume mixtures such as kifi that contained 16 ingredients, including raisins, frankincense, myrrh, pine, honey, wine, and juniper berries. The mixtures were ground in a mortar, soaked in wine, and or heated to produce a thick, pungently sweet paste. The paste was then applied to the skin or it was consumed because it was believed to have health benefits. You could also put the paste on hot coals to produce an incense of smoky fragrance. Even Western society used to have standards. In the Roman Empire, it was an everyday routine to spend 2 or more hours splashing, soaking, and steaming the body in water of various temperatures, raking off sweat and oil with a metal scraper, and oiling the body. Which sounds absolutely heavenly. I wish I had 2 or more hours of my day every day to soak in a tub. But also something I learned while researching, in the Roman Empire, fragrances were sometimes released from ceiling sprinkler systems during elaborate banquets to complement different courses, and even individual dishes were sometimes spiked with perfume. Noma, count your motherfucking days. So when did this all change? Well, in the 14th century, after the Black Death obliterated 25 million people, French scientists clung to this idea that bathing was actually harmful for the body's health. And for the next 400 years or so, medical opinion deemed that bad substances would enter the body through your pores. And so it was necessary to keep them clogged with dirt as to protect yourself. Louis XIII of France was bathed for the first time at almost 7 years old. So how did they keep clean? I've literally talked about this in a bunch of other videos, but it bears repeating, especially if this is your first time on my channel. Up until the end of the 18th century, the everyday Frenchman's routine was to change their linen shirts and maybe dabble their hands with a little bit of water, but never ever soap. Louis XIV and his brother Philippe were considered especially hygienic because they changed their shirts 3 times a day. Linen was believed to have healing powers. It was believed to be able to absorb the impurities out of your skin. Architect Louis Savot said in 1626, "Our usage of linen today serves to keep the body clean more conveniently than the baths and vapor baths of the ancients could do." At the time, he even thought adding bathrooms to his designs were unnecessary. People's attitudes back then about changing your linens frequently mirrored the attitudes that people have today about showering frequently, which is to say you were considered gross if you didn't do it. In the 18th century, the poet Christopher Smart was actually sent to a madhouse with one of the charges being he did not love clean linen. To keep themselves from smelling too bad, Europeans, particularly European aristocrats, doused themselves with heavy perfumes. And they didn't just put it on their skin, they put it on their fabric, so their gloves, their dresses, their handkerchiefs. At the time, there was overall this aristocratic tendency to be distanced from nature. The court of Versailles aimed to mask their BO with perfumes based on civet, ambergris, and musk, and non-washable brocades, velvets, and satins were cut and padded to conceal and distort the body's natural shape. As a fun fact, perfumes were actually essential in counteracting the putrid smells of substances required in the process of tanning leather. As a result, the French fragrance trade had become the preserve of a select group of leather workers called the Gantiers Parfumeurs. If you've read the book Perfume by Patrick Susskind, which is immaculately written, it's a fictional story about this French man, Grenouille, who has an insanely vivid sense of smell, and the writing is just so delicious. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. But yeah, they do talk about this industry quite a lot. I am talking about the French here because the bottom line is that bathing habits differed from country to country. So while it was unpopular to bathe in Western Europe, Germany and Eastern European countries didn't relinquish their bathing houses that easily. Bathing to them was still thought to be a good remedy for illnesses. But bathing started to become more in vogue, even in France, by the end of the 18th century because medical opinion was turning around and suddenly scientists were like, oh, actually, We need to have unclogged pores because our body excretes things out of these pores. Aristocrats were also starting to attach themselves back to the natural world. This is in part because of influential philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was very pro-agrarian. He also believed that cleanliness was part and parcel of the purity and naturalness he associated with the countryside. The trend also impacted fashion, which leaned on cottons and simpler silhouettes, which in turn made clean clothes more possible and unwashed bodies more noticeable. Perfumes also became light and floral, suggestive of springtime meadows. There were also inventions in the bathing sphere. Chemists developed a way to make soap out of soda ash instead of timber ash, which made these soaps more mild and less smelly. Steamboat trade also allowed the soap market to expand. The cholera outbreak and the work of Dr. John Snow also emphasized the need for clean water and better sanitation systems, especially in major cities. Britain even passed the Baths and Wash Houses Act of 1846, which focused on building new public baths. To give an idea of all this improvement, in France, at the beginning of Louis XIV's reign in 1644, there were 2 public baths. In 1773, there were 9 public baths, and by 1830, there were 78 public baths. By the beginning of the 19th century, Duchess de Brant claimed, "An elegant woman does not pass 2 days without bathing." In America, it was actually the Civil War that pushed a pro-washing agenda. Washing was deemed an egalitarian practice because it didn't cost very much, and Americans were looking for a new way to mark civility and status that wasn't based on who you were born to. And after the Civil War, advertising stepped in, and by the turn of the 20th century, the US was the cleanest Western country, which it remains today. So let's get back to the question. Let's not lose track of the plot here. Did people smell back then in the 17th and 18th centuries, let's say? Yes and no. I mean, at the time, bathing practices were non-existent. People definitely did not take care of themselves in the way that they needed to. It's pretty abysmal that Louis XIII didn't take a bath until he was a child. With that said, I do think a really big factor that we have to be made aware of is that the nose is a very powerful feature. It can get used to smells fairly quickly. Think about it. Only 20 or 30 years ago, airplanes, restaurants, and hotel rooms were thick with cigarette smoke, and it was hardly noticeable compared to now, when we can immediately smell a cigarette in a smoke-free room. As Aschenberg writes, the nose is adaptable and teachable. I don't know if you've ever been to like a friend's house and they have a cat that pees everywhere, and you can smell the cat pee when you come into the house. But after a while, you kind of become nose blind to it. It's the same type of thing. So something that would be offensive to our modern day noses might not have been offensive for a 17th century person's nose because it was just the smells that they were used to. But I also want to say that sometimes people did smell egregiously bad, even compared to the rest of society, and these cases were documented. For example, Louis XIV was known among the court to have bad breath, and his mistress, Madame de Montespan, frequently complained about it and resulted in wearing lots and lots of heavy perfume. The king, ironically, hated her perfume. But even earlier, so around the 5th century CE, some religions resulted in using scented oils and burning incense because the people who showed up to these public worship spaces smelled really foul. Odor artist Sissel Tola said, "What is the body without the smell of mango? You don't know. And before mango, it was lemon, and before that, rose." People are so used to fictions that reality is difficult to react to, and people are afraid of smelling like themselves because that means being naked. In the 20th and 21st century Western culture, the ideal society is odorless. Let me explain what I mean by that. One example is just the way cities are designed. Modernity is odorless. Since the 18th century, urban planners have been looking for ways to clean up cities, not just on a literal level by building in sewage systems and etc., but via aesthetic means as well. As French historical sociologist George Vigarello says, only the visible counts when it comes to constructing the concept of cleanliness. What Vigarello refers to is that before the modern hygiene agenda, people only focused on the exposed parts of their body when it came to cleanliness. So, for example, throughout the Middle Ages, etiquette manuals and civility manuals, which codified behavior that was expected of nobility, these manuals only emphasized washing your face and washing your hands, ignoring the rest of your body. Similarly, in design, 18th century architects were focused only on the surface level sanitation of their cities. Materials like stone, plaster, and paint tried to contain some of the noxious city smells, but in reality, they barely did anything, and it was their superficial effect on the eye that created the placebo of a clean city. As Rodolphe El Khoury writes, urban odors seem to have lingered and intensified well into the 19th century. The worst ever were supposedly reported in the summer of 1880. The most clear example to me of aesthetic sanitation is the sidewalk, because let me tell you, as a child, I was very germophobic. I was deathly afraid of dirt and grass. I never wanted to step on it. When I went to the beach, my dad had to carry me because I just didn't want to walk on the sand. I was really high maintenance when it came to this. And because of that, because of this aversion to the natural elements, I would say, I clung to the sidewalk like a lifeline. But the sidewalk doesn't clean anything. There's still dirt underneath it. It just covers it so we don't see it. In the book Past Sense, Jonathan Reynars adds to the list of modern surface embellishments. The reflectivity of polished surfaces suggested impermeability and salubrity, while the white wall gradually gained a universal appeal and translated the olfactory condition of odorlessness into an image. Another example is that our culture is very visual, and when we're watching commercials or movies, we can't smell what's on screen. Hollywood films are inodorate. Unless you go to a 4D theater, which I actually have been to because there's a number of them across Disney World. And if you didn't know, I used to work at Disney World, but that's a story for another day. I also have a very potent memory of going to see Shrek in 4D. Or I think the short, it was a short. It wasn't like the full movie Shrek. But at Universal Studios back in like 2003 or 2004, they were showing Shrek 4D in a 4D theater. So you could feel things at some point, like your seat moved. And there were moments when there was just like this like odor that would circle the room to make it a more lively experience. And that was very cool. So yeah, I am for the 4D agenda. We need more. We need banquets that are spraying perfume from the ceilings. Like, we need all of this back. But as the writers write in Aroma, these scentless representations, which continually produce and reproduce the world for us, reinforce the social drive for deodorization. On the marketing front, advertisers literally reinforce the deodorization agenda by constructing narratives that makes the idea of smell bad. For example, in January 1931, Listerine ran an ad that said, "Fired and for a reason he never suspected." Several months later, Lifebuoy soap ran an ad that read, "Don't risk your job by offending with BO. Take no changes. When business is slack, employers become more critical. Sometimes very little may turn the scales against us." This is even more unethical as a narrative because these ads were pushed during the Great Depression when, one, people didn't have as much disposable income as they used to have, and two, they were extremely afraid about losing their jobs. So these companies essentially pitched these unnecessary products as being essential if you want to keep your job. And then there's also the term halitosis, which many of us know as the pseudo-medical fancy term for bad breath. By attaching a scientific term to refer to bad breath, it allowed advertisers to feign authority and reframe their ad into like this PSA, trying to protect the public from bad health. For example, not to call out Listerine once again, but Listerine created an extremely successful advertising campaign for their mouthwash using the word halitosis. In an early version of A/B testing, coupons were sent out accompanying old and new style Listerine ads. The halitosis ads did 4 times as well, and sales climbed 33% in just the first month. Advertising copywriters soon started to label over 100 new diseases, trying to ride the success of halitosis, including bromodosis, sweaty foot odors, homodosis, lack of attractive home furnishings, and acidosis, a sour stomach. But using medical sounding language to advertise is not a new concept, unfortunately. In 1927, the Association of American Soap and Glycerin Producers created a lobbying arm called the Cleanliness Institute to publish marketing materials under the guise of education. The institute distributed teachers' curriculum, posters, and books like 1928's A Tale of Soap and Water, The Historical Progress of Cleanliness, which taught children and teens the value of hygiene throughout the ages. In it, the book explains, most of us want the good and beautiful and worthwhile things of life. Soap and water alone cannot give them to us, but we know that they help. It literally reads like advertising copy, and what's sad is that children who probably read these books don't recognize that, and they just take it as the truth, like us 90s babies took The Care and Keeping of You as truth. Which, I have not revisited that book because it was very formative for my health education, and I think it'd be really sad if I read it and realized they were pushing some whack agenda. So hopefully that book is clean and untouched, but I'm not surprised by anything these days. All of this is to say, we're getting a little too obsessed, in my opinion, with cleanliness and fragrance, and most of it is because of marketers. Hygiene products are marketed to make it seem like we'll be unaccepted by society or not get a date if we don't use them. And let's be honest, a lot of this marketing disproportionately targets women. Kate Kane, a feminist who surveyed the gamut of advertisements of sprays, says, taken together, these commercials form a picture of a people obsessed with physical intimacy, yet unable to achieve it without performing many elaborate, expensive daily purifications. And sometimes these purification rituals actually have adverse effects. When it comes to showering, dermatologist Dr. Sephora Shanehouse tells Thrillist, daily washing is not necessary for most people. It washes off natural oils and leaves skin dry and at risk for irritation. Many Americans admit to showering every day of the week. In comparison, people in China, Britain, and Japan report on average showering 5 times a week. French and Spanish people reportedly shower as much as Americans, but shampoo their hair less frequently. Part of the reason why America is so hell-bent on being squeaky clean compared to Europe is because America had more abundant space to create cleaning facilities from the beginning. Aschenberg writes, water mains and sewers were more easily installed in new cities than in ancient ones. With abundant, cheap land, houses with ample space for bathrooms became the domestic norm, in contrast to Europe's old, crowded apartments. Because servants were always in short supply in democratic America, labor-saving devices were prized. High on the list was plumbing, and from the 1870s, American plumbing outstripped that of every other country. Sometimes we have to ask ourselves, is there an agenda being pushed when it comes to these hygienic practices that we've been told to believe? And a lot of the times the answer is yes. Body and face soap is a $3.1 billion industry annually, and the US Census Bureau reports people spend $4.3 billion on shampoo a year. Meanwhile, some bacteria is actually good for your skin. The human skin hosts about 200 species of bacteria, which sounds really gross, but a lot of them are good for you. One of the bacteria that causes BO is Staphylococcus hominis. Sorry to her, but I cannot pronounce that word. S. hominins smells really gross, but they actually protect the skin from inflammatory issues like eczema and dangerous infections like MRSA. Sweating itself is good for you. The body produces antimicrobial molecules and stores them in your sweat. Dermatologist Richard Gallo says sweat is almost like an antibiotic juice, and as the water evaporates, those antibiotics actually increase in concentration. So it kind of leaves a little coating on your skin. So that's one of the ways our skin tries to fight the bad bacteria. A lot of people don't know these things, but even when we do, it's really hard to change our behaviors. And personally, I get it. I still take a shower every day despite knowing this, despite the fact that my skin is dry. So I literally exit the shower every day like a lobster.
When you tell your girl to leave the shower on for you.
but it's like I can't stop. I just love showering. I love water. I find it very meditative, very calming. I love a good steam, but I've been trying to shampoo less. I've been trying to use body wash less, just in general be more of like an ancient Roman, I guess, because I just know that I do love showering, and I don't think I can relinquish it as part of my daily routine, at least now in my life. The habits are even harder to break when it's a coping mechanism, which is the case for a lot of people and also for me. I'll admit that sometimes I shower multiple times a day during the winter. When SAD is hitting me really hard, I'm like, yeah, I'll just take a third shower today. And before anyone gets on my case on it, my landlord pays for water and heating. So it's really not costing me anything to shower more than once. As journalist Margaret Horsfield says, you can't get rid of your daughter's boyfriend that you don't like. You can't sort out the fact that your mother is dying or that you've gained 10 pounds, but you can get that sink looking better. The process of cleaning gives an illusion of order. The concept of a cleanse also implies a restart or a detox. Vegan blogger Kathy Freston says this on diet detoxification. Doing the cleanse delivers one to a fresh start. It's like a vacation, a reprieve from our old and tired ways, a way to let your body rid itself of all the stored up junk it has had to process throughout the years. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's worth it. I think what's important to remember though is that this is all mental because the body actually is constantly cleaning itself. The mucosal cells lining the digestive tract, yes, I'm a woman in STEM sometimes, actually replaces itself very frequently. Your body is constantly cleaning without you knowing. But the bottom line is media and advertisers have continually exploited our desire for a fresh start. Writer Andrea Gardner explains, we've developed a paranoia in the last 5 to 10 years. She points to TV shows in which an expert shines a black light on a seemingly tidy hotel room and then exclaims, this mattress looks completely clean, and yet, look at all the dust mites. We as an audience are then made aware of invisible filth, and yeah, it just increases our paranoia. Marketers also shame parents for not keeping their kids clean. If you don't do these things, disinfecting their household and carrying around hand sanitizer to soccer practice, they make it seem like you're a bad parent, or let's be honest, a bad mom, because mothers tend to absorb the brunt of bad parenting complaints. But does overly sanitizing your kids actually protect them? Or is it another ploy to convince you that you need to buy more fragrance wipes or more expensive laundry detergent? A lot of scientists actually believe that our sanitized environments are fostering allergies in children. They believe that children who lack exposure to dirt, bacteria, and other kinds of microorganisms develop weaker immune systems and are thus more prone to asthma and allergies. I mean, take this information with a grain of salt because, there's not one conclusive reason for why kids are developing allergies and asthma. There's a number of contributing factors. For example, one of the theories is that vitamin D or lack of vitamin D makes your body more susceptible to developing allergies, and because kids now spend so much time indoors, that's the reason. Also, the overuse of cleaning products can actually make the germs around us even stronger. Germs are highly adaptive and they will literally adapt to being super germs unless they are all killed off. And this is how viruses mutate too. If there's one thing I learned from a high school biology class, other than the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, it's that please finish all of your antibiotics that are prescribed to you. We had to watch this very unsettling documentary about these inmates who had tuberculosis in a Russian prison, and they were literally all dying because they weren't given enough antibiotics and the tuberculosis was mutating and they just couldn't fight it. And it was very sad. And please let me know if you've also been forced to watch this documentary, because sometimes I think I've made it up in my head because I can't remember what it was called, but I definitely watched it because it scarred me for life. And yeah, bottom line, finish your antibiotics. Overall, I am pro cleanliness. I don't want this video to come off as me telling you to never take a shower again and basically become a 17th century aristocrat. That is not the point of the video. The point is I just wanted to dissect our cleanliness culture and just talk about it because it's something that we don't really talk about too often. It's like an unspoken truth that we should be showering every day and washing our hair and shampooing when the reality is we don't. I also do want to recognize that, as I said at the beginning, hygiene rituals are used to oppress marginalized groups. So being a person of color, being of another gender, being of, an immigrant background, like there's a lot of reasons why people feel pressured to maintain a certain level of hygiene, even when they know that they don't necessarily need to. But I do think it's sad because after reading all these books that I read, you just learn to appreciate smell way more and recognize the importance of it. Like, smell is one of the most potent ways of preserving a memory. Smell is one of the first things a baby recognizes when it comes out of the womb. Their mother's smell is what comforts them. And smell is also an important indicator of upbringing and culture. At the January 2009 Jaipur Literature Festival, which is the largest literary festival in the Asia Pacific, 4 well-known Hindi writers lamented the fact that their home cities, Jaipur and Calcutta, no longer smell the way that they used to. This is in part because many of the markets and bazaars that were everywhere in the city are slowly and gradually getting replaced by air-conditioned, sanitized malls and multiplexes. These authors link smell directly with history, claiming it's become very difficult to take care of one's roots today. Once we forget our gond, our smell, we forget our roots. Even in Western places, smells are disappearing. Michael Magan, a Glaswegian author, for example, laments encountering little more than the memories of smell on a return visit to the neighborhood of his youth. And honestly, even though I love a perfume, I love the idea of a signature scent, I honestly have a lot of grievances with the fragrance market and how I feel that a lot of these fragrance producers are just not experimental enough. They're just operating in a very limited way. I actually ordered a couple animal-themed perfume samples from this indie brand, Zoologist Perfumes, which I'm really excited to try out. I did a little sniff test so far, and by far my favorite scent that I ordered is Camel, which I'll tell you why I ordered it, because the description on the website is freaking crazy. On the website, it's described as, in Zoologist Camel, beautiful aromas of rose and jasmine-infused succulent dried fruits are joined along the way by an alluring blend of incense, myrrh, amber, and cinnamon. Soon met by animalistic musks and authentic oud, they surround you in a rich tapestry. This sensual caravan of fragrance carries you away to accompany the camel on its long, lonely journey across the ageless desert. That just smells delicious and interesting. And I also ordered a Tyrannosaurus Rex perfume because I was curious. And I don't know if the smell is necessarily for me, but it has this very heavy, burny incense smell, which I think is reflective of lava, maybe, of meteor shattering and destroying all the dinosaurs. I think that's just a very inventive theme to play with, the theme of animals. And I wish more mainstream perfume makers would go the distance and do something cool like that. So with that said, as I go back into my perfume collecting journey, I am on the market for animalistic, for funky, for weird perfumes. And if you have any recommendations, I would love to hear them. And I also want to share something that Sissel Tolas talked about, which I think would be a really cool idea. Basically, a fragrance would begin with a ground or base of your own unique body smell, and then you could choose different molecules to add to it. And maybe you have one perfume for sex, one for business, one for whatever. Just having something based on your own unique body chemistry. That'd be really, really cool. And that would just take signature scent to the next level. Okay, thank you all for tuning in today. That's all I have to say about it. I would love to hear, why do I keep saying love like that? I would love to hear what you all have to say about perfumes and cleanliness and whatever. I don't know. I do enjoy reading comments that are based on personal experience. I think those are very interesting, and we all have such unique experiences. So please share away. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.